Supporting you in your dog parenting journey. The Dynamic Dog Owner with Debbie Potter. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of The Dynamic Dog Owner, the podcast designed to support you, the dog parent, in your dog parenting journey and help you see the dog world from a fresh perspective and hopefully make you think about life with your dog and whether there are any tweaks and changes you can make. Today I'm going to answer a question that I get asked quite frequently, and that question is about whether there is a particular breed that is easier to train than another. It's often one that we hear from people considering getting a puppy. Which breed should I get? Which breed is going to be the easiest? Which breed, respond to training the best? All those kind of questions. And I don't have a definitive answer for you, but we're going to consider some of the points that we could consider when we're asking ourselves this. So first of all, what makes a dog easy to train? And this is really, kind of very wishy-washy. So things that make a dog easy to train is, first of all, they have to be happy and comfortable in their own skin. They have to be confident, level-headed emotionally, well socialized, and all of that kind of kit and caboodle that goes way before we actually consider training. So think of it as, we see dogs as I want to train them, but actually there's a lot of emotions and a lot of other factors that need to come into play. So when you're considering getting a puppy, for example, and want to train it, you have to look at things like the breeder. What's the breeder like? Are they going to give them a good start in life? Are they coming from good stock parents? All of those questions. Are they healthy? And that goes for adult dogs as well. Are they healthy? Because if a dog is unhealthy, and I don't mean like unhealthy in like us, we eat cake. I mean like if there's an underlying health condition. So say, for example, like one of my dogs has a genetic condition. That doesn't make him not as easy to train. It just means I have to train differently to suit him. But, things like pain. If your dog's in pain, they're not going to want to train. They're not going to want to do stuff. We often then blame the dog and say, you don't want to learn. It's actually that there's something else going on. It might be that they aren't in the right emotional state. So say you've got a really nervous dog. It's not their ability to train that's necessarily the problem. It's their emotional state. If they're really scared, if they're really fearful, if they're really anxious, if they're nervous, naturally, they're going to be spending more of their energy protecting themselves and making sure they are safe than worrying about performing some fancy trick that you want them to do. Equally, if you've got a dog that's far too overexcited, over-aroused, energetic, bouncy, and too bigger emotions in that term of excitement emotions, again, they're not going to be able to do any learning because, again, they are not in a thinking state of mind. So I think that's one of the main things we actually have to consider, rather than breed, is individual dog. Is all of that box ticked? And obviously some of these things we're not going to know when we first get a dog if you're picking a dog, but it might be a question of thinking about the next dog or why, I've got a harder time because I've got an X rather than a this dog. It's the underlying stuff that we overlook, we forget about because we don't see it, quite simply. And dogs can't tell us because dogs are very good at hiding pain. They can't tell us when there's an issue. They can't tell us when they don't feel right. And it tends to come out in other ways. And one of those can be behaviour, in terms of they have problematic behaviour. Another can be that they aren't willing to train. They don't want to participate. We go, oh, my dog's so stubborn. Or they're just being a pain. We don't go, actually, there's probably a reason behind this. So I think the emotional state of our dog is incredibly important to consider before we think about trainability. I then also think that the underlying health concerns, any pain, all of those things have to be ruled out. And that's often why if you work with a trainer behaviourist over issues that are sort of more than your standard training things, more problematic behaviours, often you'll get asked to go and have a vet check or have a sort of more holistic health check in terms of muscles, etc. Because we know that these things affect our dog's state of mind. We know it, if you feel stressed, you can't take on information as well. If you're feeling a little bit scared, a little bit anxious, and you're then asked to answer a question, you naturally go into even more of a panic state. So we know it for us, therefore why don't we consider it with our dogs? So that's one thing that we really need to look at. And I say, if you're thinking about getting a dog, it highlights the importance of breeding and making sure you select a good breeder, or you take into account your dog's background if you're rescuing. So again, rescues, you've got private rescues where you rehome from another family. You've got rescue centres from the UK. You've got foreign rescue. We have to, again, take into account their history. Some of it might be known, some of it might not be known. But again, the history that they have is likely to affect how easy it is to train them. Some dogs are more used to living in a home environment. Others will have been street dogs. Others will have lived in a rescue centre for a long period of their life. Therefore, they take a natural period to adjust. If they're young, then sometimes that adjustment period isn't as long. But say you've had a dog that's been in a kennel a year, naturally, it's going to take them longer to get used to living in a house and the day-to-day stuff before we look at training. So that's one of the most important things when it comes to is a particular breed trainable, more trainable than another. It's not necessarily about the breed. Sometimes it's about all that background work. So those are the things we have to consider. Now, the other thing we have to look at is really rewards, because different dogs will be rewarded in different ways. We've had another podcast episode on it in the past, but feel free to look back at that one. But a reward is anything your dog likes, anything they want repeated, or anything they desire. So we tend to think of rewards as always being, I'll give you a treat. But a reward can be access. A reward can be, I get to do something. A reward can be a feeling it creates. So for example, if you've got a reactive, fearful dog, they woof, another dog or person leaves their space. The reward is woofing gets people to leave me alone. It makes me more comfortable. So it's an emotional state of feeling more comfortable that is actually the reward. You've then got things like toys, you've got play, you've got attention. There's so many different things. And different breeds will want different rewards. Now, often, yes, every dog has to eat. That's the argument. Every dog has to eat, and therefore they all would like to have food reward. But some dogs aren't overly driven by food. Does that make them less trainable? My answer would be no. It just makes it a little bit harder. It's easy. If you've got a dog who will just take food all the time. I mean, I've got 2 labs. They're never not hungry. They're never fully satisfied. There's always room for more. It's kind of a trait of labs that, generally speaking, labs do like to eat. There have been scientific studies that say that some labs have had a gene mutation that means they basically never feel full. That's where it comes from, and labs generally are foodies. It doesn't mean so you can't get one that doesn't like food, but it makes, as a trainer, it makes life easy because you haven't got to explore different rewards. You just give them what they need. If they don't eat food, it means as a trainer, as a handler, you just have to be more creative. Does that mean they're harder to train? I don't know. I don't think it makes them harder to train. I think it just means you have to put more effort in. So for example, think about what dogs are. Obviously, we've got the food that we can reward. We've got toys that we can reward them with. Fuss and attention. They're always popular. But when you start to think about external rewards like environmental rewards or even breed-specific rewards, so think about each breed. Every breed has got a purpose, a reason they were developed, bred a certain way, a reason we've channeled the lines of their breed into a certain job or a certain role. And we have selectively bred them to be good at a particular job. If you research it, every breed has a purpose. So again, I always revert to labs because it's what I have, labs and retrievers. It's in the title, they're designed to retrieve. They were bred and used in many different forms, but now we use them specifically for gun dog work. So retrieving birds, that's their specific job. Spaniels, again, very similar but slightly different. Their job is to sniff, to hunt, to flush. Therefore, they like sniffing. You've got other breeds. What else? I'm trying to think of some. Collies, herding. Obviously, every breed is different. There's so many out there. I'm not going to mention them all. But you got Dachshunds, badger baiting. So if you think about it, each breed we have bred so that their job, their task that we bred them to do is intrinsically reinforcing. So that means it's a natural way that they feel happy. So for example, my labs, anyone with a lab will tell you anything gets in the mouth, some more than others. But when my dogs greet me, there's stuff in their mouths. They have to pick up something when they're excited. Naturally, holding something in their mouth makes them feel good. It's reward in itself. I don't need to be involved in it. Just holding something makes me feel good. other breeds, spaniels, sniffing, just sniffing, seeing a bird fly, making it move. That's rewarding. It comes from within. It's part of their nature and the makeup we have made them. Now, if you have a dog who isn't a foodie and their natural breed reinforcement is more of a challenge, say, for example, bully breeds, they were bred generally for things like bull baiting and bullfighting. Unless you've got a bull in your back garden, you cannot reinforce that very well. It's not as easy. And that's why personally, I have gun dog breeds. I like gun dog breeds. I find that I would never want to stray away from a gun dog breed as an owner, because I feel that I can simulate their breed specific needs and reinforcements and rewards easily, quite simply. And maybe I just need an easy life. Maybe I like an easy life. That's fine. Some breeds, it's harder. Collies, if you've got a flock of sheep, you can create that natural reward easily. If you haven't, it's a bit tough, and they find their own sheep. It's why a lot of collies can be reactive to movement. It's easier for some than others. Some breeds we have to be a bit creative. So like bull breeds, for example, who are trying to effectively take down a large animal. You've got ropes and things that you can hang that they can pull on. It just means you've got to think outside the box a little bit to find their rewards. And again, these factors make out whether a dog is easy to train or not. Because if you haven't got these things on tap, or if you can't think outside the box to create the reward, naturally the motivation isn't there. And a lot of training success is about actually motivation. Does your dog want to do it? And if the answer is no, then they're not going to want any reward anyway, because they don't want to do it in the first place. So we have to create motivation. And often motivation comes from rewards, which again can be food, can be toys, can be the natural breed stuff. So it's a weird question to answer, quite simply, because I don't think there is a right or wrong answer. I think some breeds are easier than others purely because of their genetic makeup, their history, and their breed as to whether we can fulfill it. Some it's harder. And that's not to say they're not trainable. It just means the humans have to think outside the box. Now, another factor we have to consider about which is the easiest breed is the human, because every person will find training different and find the energy for training, the motivation for training, the being as matching their dog's energy and breed part of the challenge. Because if again you've got a dog that needs you to think outside the box and you just want an easy life and to play fetch, then naturally they're always going to be harder to train because you're not tapping into what they need. If you haven't got a lot of time, if you haven't got a lot of skill, because a lot of dog training, it is a skill, it's an art. It is not something that is easy for many people. It takes an awful lot of different parts. You've got obviously, the knowledge of dogs, understanding your dog. You've then got the mechanics of it in terms of people's coordination, people's timing, reading a situation, adapting, remembering all the exercises you've ever learned and knowing which one to use in that moment. It's an art form, which is why it takes a long time. Many dog owners will say that it was easier the second time round because they have already practiced. Your first dog effectively is like a practice run. My first dog, I can't count that because he was really easy. My first puppy was definitely a practice run. So Dave's kind of like the dog I made mistakes with almost, because I over-socialised him. I let him say hello to everybody. He now wants to say hello to people. Is that him? Is it his breed traits? Is it his genetics? Is it the influence I had? Who knows? Can't tell you that. The next one was really easy. Again, I got more skill, but it could be his genetic makeup. You just don't know. But as a handler, the more you do, the more you practice, the more different dogs you experience, you learn. So I'm obviously on my fourth dog as an adult now. Each one has taught me something different and has adapted my skill set, but I have had to meet them where they are. Was any of them easier to train? Who knows? Dave, easy peasy. He loves food and he'll do anything for it. So he is actually quite easy to train, but he's got underlying health conditions that make it harder in a way because of his tenacity. He doesn't have a lot of stamina. He's like, whatever. Rem, easy to train. He's always game. He's always up for it. But we have the issue that he's overexcited. So sometimes I don't want to train him because it's hard work, because I have to match his energy and I have to be one step ahead. We have to spend a lot of time winding down. He's easier at teaching things, he picks stuff up really quickly, but managing his emotions is the challenging bit. Fred, probably the hardest dog to train because he doesn't have a lot of motivation and will do something once and go, no, thank you, I don't want to do it again. All good. So he lacks the drive that the others do. Is any of them easier than the other? No, they're just different in my opinion. There's often a lot of things that will come about where people will say, oh, you don't want to get one of them because they're notoriously difficult to train. We have so many people ring us up with certain dog breeds and say, well, I've heard these guys are, really hard to train. Have you got experience in them? And classically it's tends to be what we class as a stubborn breed. Dogs aren't stubborn. It's an emotion. They're not understanding it. They haven't got the mental, the emotional development to understand behaviours or emotions such as stubbornness. It's just they're unmotivated. We haven't worked out what reward there is, and we haven't figured them out yet. And we maybe have too high expectations, because that is quite common. So, some breeds are harder, I believe, because they just need a more expert handler who can tap into them a little bit more and can use history of their own human learning to put into practice, and that you just have to work out what they need. It's not as simple as just throwing them a treat. They need the more environmentals and the more breed-specific rewards. So, if you were to ask me what's the easiest breed, in my opinion, for me, it's a Labrador, because I like them, I can match them, I understand them, I know what reinforces them, I've lived with them, and I get them. If you were to ask me what's the most hardest, I don't know. So I very much think it's not about a specific breed. There are some breeds I think are easier for first-time owners. Labrador isn't one of them. Most people get a Labrador as a first-time dog. And I actually think they're not a first-time dog because they're so big and strong. And they're generally very enthusiastic and they want to say hello to everybody. So they're a tough first-time dog. A smaller breed is possibly easier. But again, it depends on the person. So it's not just about the dog. And I think, again, this comes down to that a lot of what we think about with dogs is the dog. The dog needs to be trained. It's the dog's fault. It's the dog that's hard. It's the breed that's hard to train. It's the dog that's being stubborn. It's a partnership. It is 50-50. Everything we do with our dogs is 50-50. It's a team. And there are two parts to that team. It's no different to any relationship, a marriage. It takes two people to have a successful marriage. It takes a human and a dog to have a successful relationship. It's not all about the dog. It's about what we do. So it's about getting the dog that matches you as an individual, and that's down to, say, the history, the breeds that you feel that you can connect with more, the breeds you've got more history with, the breeds that you can research and really get to know who they are and what they need. And then recognising that not every dog of that breed is actually going to be exactly the same. And one lab might be food driven, another one might not be. One collie might be amazing at herding sheep and one couldn't give a flying monkeys about it. It's very individual to the dog and the people, which is why things like generic bits you read on the internet, which is the easiest breed to train, are very narrow-minded in my opinion, because there's so many factors that we need to take into account, all the things we've talked about so far on the podcast today. So it's not just about the breed, putting all of them into, one box and saying every breed of this is easy, every breed of this is hard, because there's so many other factors, the health, the history of learning, the rewards, the people, all of those things. So we have to take all of that into consideration when we ask the question, which is the easiest breed to train? And there are harder ones, but the questions I would ask yourself are, if you're thinking about getting a dog and you want to know, or if you're thinking about getting another dog, or you just go, the one I've got seems a bit tricky. Is it because of this? Ask yourself, what was their breed bred for? Can I work out, therefore, what is rewarding, internally rewarding for them? Can I simulate it? Can I channel it? Because if the answer is no, that makes it really hard. If the answer's, not sure. If the answer's, yeah, that's easy, then obviously it's going to be a little bit easier for you. If it's one you have to really think about and think outside the box for, then great. You just have to be a little bit more creative. You then obviously, as we say, had to look at all the other things, the emotional state. It's so underrated that the emotions are going to affect behaviour. We just have to remember that dogs feel those emotions too. It looks different and we go, how on earth you live in a house rent-free? How can you be stressed? But they are and they can be. And we have to take into consideration that affects their training. And I say the genetic side of it, again, plays a massive part. You've got working line breeds and show breeds. Naturally, your working line breeds are going to be more enthusiastic and have more drive than a show line breed because of how we've bred them. So it's also just bearing all those things in mind. So this isn't really a definitive answer, you've probably guessed by now. Are there certain breeds that are easy to train? No. But there are certain breeds that suit us as an individual and the human connection with dogs and the merging of two worlds more than others. So it's a case of working out what you can do as a person, your experience, and researching the breed and seeing if you can make those two match. Think of it like speed dating. You've got to make a good match that you and your dog match each other in terms of what you can give and how you think and what energies you have as to whether the dog is easily trainable for you as an individual or as a family. Hopefully that's useful in some form and just again made you think a little bit easier and maybe answered a question you might have had and giving you my opinion on it. I hope you guys have a lovely week and I will catch up with you very soon. Thank you for listening to The Dynamic Dog Owner with me, Debbie Potter. See you next time.